Did you hear that?
I did, yeah.
Okay. So you know it's starting. Okay, we're Steven. I'm Steven and Abraham, and we're two people who are about a generation apart, and we're just talking, and Abraham wants to learn things about what it was like in the old days. Oh, so so why don't we start off, Abraham? Go ahead and kick it off for us.
Yeah, I'm really interested in really in the again I was saying like the timeline of when for you went through high school, went through school, college, all that stuff, obviously without the internet. And as for me, I didn't have the internet in the way that we do now, but I had definitely a good solid version of it even in like my middle school era of life. So I'm sort of interested in when the internet started to become a thing for you. Did it feel like did it feel like just a trend, like a fad, like, oh, like, yeah, this is just a thing that people go onto? Maybe like, what was your first encounter with the internet?
Okay, so I'm going to take you back even further than that. Okay, when I was a boy and I was interested in a girl, I had to pick up a landline phone. Okay, and I had to dial a rotary. So you dial six, da, 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 8, da, 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 da. Okay, and then kids never answered their own phones, so you always had to talk to the girl's mother or father and say, hello, is Kelly there? And if it's the father, more times than not, they'd be like, who's calling? And so you didn't have cell phones, and you couldn't call them directly or text them or anything like that. So, you know, as I mentioned last time, I didn't have a lot of confidence. I'd hang up. As soon as I heard the dad, I hang up. Oh, screw this.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and then when I watched TV, you had to, you know, there were 12 primary channel options, and then there was something called UHF, which was like another 50 channels, but it was all, you know, over the air. And, you know, I lived in Detroit, the Detroit market and the New York market growing up. So we actually had extra channels. We had more than ABC, NBC,
Oh, okay.
CBS. We had, they were called independents, and we'd have like 2 independents. So in New York, you had Channel 5 and Channel 11, and then you'd have PBS too. So, but you had to turn the little knob, and there was no cable. So, you know, you watched every Sunday night in my house. We had to watch 60 Minutes, and then that turned into, I think it was All in the Family. My dad loved All in the Family. He thought Archie Bunker. Have you ever heard of it?
Yeah, I know of All in the Family, Archie Bunker, all that, yeah.
Yeah. My dad thought Archie Bunker was the funniest thing since, you know, since Groucho Marx. So that's what I grew up with, right? And then I'm trying to think. When I went to college, we didn't have cable. They had not wired our street when I went to cable, but they had cable at the fraternity house. And it was a box, right? And you had to change the channels on the box. And literally you had to press down on a button. And then there was this like curvy thing. So you'd have 12 buttons, and then you move the knob, the curvy thing, to the middle, and you'd have 12 more buttons. And then you'd move it all the way down, and you'd have, you know, so you had a total of 36 channels. Like, wow! And, you know, in the fraternity house, MTV was on all the time because they're playing these music videos.
Yeah. What sort of like, I mean, it's like interesting for me to think about the timeline of the technological advancements happening in front of you, where you're like, especially again, like talking about culture, where it's like, okay, MTV's happening when you're in college. Okay, like that tells me about like the landscape of everything that's going on at that time with that too. So it's like
yeah, you got the biggest videos. There was a video from a group that was a one-hit wonder called Aha.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Take on Me. And it's like this drawing.
I love that video.
Okay, so you've seen it, being an artist.
Yeah, but I saw it. Listen, I'm seeing it via YouTube now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's how I'm watching it.
Yep. But no, it was on MTV, and you had to wait for them to work it into the cycle. Michael Jackson Thriller was like, for weeks on end, they were promoting, the grand, the release, the grand release of Michael Jackson Thriller.
Right.
And the video was like 12 minutes long.
This is also something I'm really interested in about kind of like the differences between like how accessible things are now and like how like an underground music scene, for instance, now is like it's really quick. I mean, it can exist in a pocket probably just for a little bit now, but because of the internet and it's like as soon as enough people like it enough, it could surface up and become somewhat of a part of like a mainstream subculture. Like for you, was it like I mean, it's obvious that a lot of things were able to stay a secret for a long time, it felt like, probably back then. Did you have things like that where you're like, oh, this band, like we can know about this band for a long time before like they got really big or something?
Yeah, I think I think we talked about Bruce Springsteen last time.
Yeah.
He was forever playing on the Jersey Shore. And we would go down there and watch him down there. And then he finally came out with an album. Well, I shouldn't say we. My friends, and I moved there in 8th grade, so, there were a lot of people who went to the Jersey Shore for the summer, but they'd go see this guy, Bruce Springsteen. And so they followed him all the way until he became really big. Billy Joel was the same way. And I'm going to talk about New York-based talent because that's where I was.
Yeah.
But Billy Joel was out on the island playing all of these bars, these dive bars.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how he came up. I'm trying to think. Madonna was just an absolute phenom. She came out of nowhere. She was this girl from Rochester, Michigan, who, in all honesty, dressed like a slut and caught a lot of people's attention because of that.
Yeah.
And she had some catchy songs, So, underground bands, I'm trying to think, much more recent times, there's up in Boston, there's this group called the Dropkick Murphys. Have you ever heard of them?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah. They have like their big song. It's like a very Boston, like Irish white guy, like at the pub bar song,
Yeah, Shipping Out to Boston.
Yeah.
And it's a very, it's got a heavy beat to it. It's very Irish.
Yeah, it's very Irish. But it's like very like Boston Irish. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like that's like what I mean. Especially they've played it in movies or in TV shows, and it's always depicted in that way. That's like kind of like I'm like always like oh yeah, that's exactly how I think about it.
I think it's in the movie called The Departed.
Yeah. Like I love that movie. Like that's like one of my favorite movies.
And that's about Whitey Bulger.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. You ever heard of Whitey? He got caught.
I've heard of him, but I don't know much.
So the town I spent 30 years in is a town called Arlington. And 2 towns over was Somerville. And Arlington was not that nice of a town, but it was literally surrounded by all of these really wealthy towns. And so by nature, it had to become a more upscale town because that's the only place, young couples could move.
Mm-hmm.
And then, when I moved there, there were a ton of, 2 and 3 family homes. And they're just a typical New England house that went up 3 stories and everybody had one level.
And was Whitey Bulger a part of that in some fashion?
Well, Whitey Bulger was in Somerville.
Okay.
Even though Arlington was a fairly nice town, Somerville was very, very blue collar. And so he could run his business, his mob.
Yeah. And was he like he was a contemporary, like he lived at that time when you were there?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Did people know? Did people know? Like, oh yeah, Whitey Bulger, like that's a name, like he's around or whatever.
Well, he had a brother, Billy Bulger, and Billy Bulger was the Speaker of the state house. He wasn't a governor, but he was, and everyone knew Whitey by reputation. That you don't screw around with Whitey. But his brother was in government.
Mm-hmm.
And, they talk about government being corrupt in Chicago. It was exactly the same in Massachusetts. I mean, everybody who was in politics had a brother who was a cop, and, it was so incestuous it wasn't even funny.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've heard about it just from, other, people have talked about it, like mob stuff and just that whole general area. Like Boston, it's a thing.
What happened was Whitey became an informant for the FBI. And the FBI let him do his thing as long as he gave them information on other mob things that were going on. And it's not The Departed, but there's another movie. Well, maybe it was The Departed. Who was in that?
Well, yeah, it's Jack Nicholson.
But
spoiler alert for anybody who's not watching already, but just Jack Nicholson is they find. Did you see Departed? They eventually find that he is an informant for FBI.
And is that the one where at the end Mark Wahlberg kills?
Yeah.
I forget who it was, but
Leo.
Okay, so that's
Matt Damon. He killed Matt Damon.
Yes, it was Matt Damon.
Yeah.
And then there's also the one with Ben Affleck where they knock off Fenway Park at the end.
I didn't see that one. That's called. Is that The Town?
The Town. Yes.
Yeah. That's like him and his brother.
It's actually a really good movie.
I heard it is.
If you get a chance, watch it. But anyway, getting back to me being in college. So cable just comes out, and there's 36 channels in Orono, Maine. If you're in New York City, they had 50 or 60.
Yeah.
But cable just came out, and my dad, who sold advertising for Newsweek magazine, they'd moved back to Michigan. He had this really cool thing. He had a phone in his car.
Oh, wow.
He had one of the first cell phones. It was bolted down. You couldn't take it out of the car.
What kind of car was this?
What did he have? He had a Pontiac 6000.
Pontiac 6000.
Yeah.
That sounds like an old-ass car.
Here's the other thing. That was a company car. Newsweek gave him a car, and they paid for the gas.
That sounds like such an old-timey thing. The idea of having a company car, the company car has a phone in it. That just sounds like, it just doesn't sound like now, obviously, because it's not all those things. It's no.
Yeah. And so, I could call him on his cell phone if he was in the car. So that's the stuff that started coming up. Now, fast forward till I was out of college, and I'd already bought my first house. But
you bought a house out of college?
No. This was it wasn't that long. I bought a house 3 or 4 years after college.
So you were in your 20s. You were in your 20s when you bought it.
Yeah, I bought a condo. Probably 3 years after I was out of college.
How much was it? How much did you Do you
I
remember?
don't know. I can tell you the house that I still own in Arlington now, that I bought 25 years ago. We got it for $200 grand.
Damn, dude.
And
That's
this
crazy.
is 5 miles outside the city of Boston. And I will tell you, it is worth 7 figures now.
Dang, it's such a. I mean, that's a big thing that is like always talked about nowadays.
Yep.
It's just like, oh, like there is no way any millennial or Gen Zer can be a first-time home buyer right now. Like there's just it just feels like impossible.
Yep.
Yeah, it's kind of a wild. Like it's not crazy, but it seems like. You know what it is? It seems like you have to have a lot of money to buy a house now. And it used to not feel like, I mean, even though buying a house obviously seemed like a big deal, still always, like, you know, being a homeowner always was a big deal.
Yep.
But my mom bought this house that we're in right now. You know, she's out of it, but, you know, it's just me and my brother that are holding it down in here. I think she bought it for like, I want to say in the high twos, you know, I don't know, something like that. I mean, that was also probably about 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago also.
Yep.
Yeah.
It
Which
was
is
totally
pretty crazy.
And I got to tell you, the state of California was totally different too. Just politically and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so, you know, Boston is very, very similar to Los Angeles in terms of cost of living.
I have heard that.
Orange County is to me, it's more expensive than LA.
Oh, interesting. What about it?
What?
What about, like, what cost of living do you mean about that? Like
housing for the most part.
Okay. Yeah, well, I just saw something that Orange County now, like the median price for a house is about $1 million in all of Orange County.
The median?
Yeah. Which is, I think we're the only county, maybe in the entire state or maybe in the entire country to have that.
I would say it's in the entire state, because Fairfield County, Connecticut has had that distinction for as long as I know.
Yeah, it's probably the state, but it's like it was something that it was just like this is like the first county ever and probably in this state to have that.
$1 million median.
Yeah. I was like, oh wow.
I don't like median because what it means is you have an equal number above it and an equal number in sheer quantity, not in value.
Yeah.
So the ones that are above $1 million in Orange County, they go up to $100 million. Well, maybe not that much, but
I mean, it's funny that the properties down in like Corona del Mar and like San Juan Capistrano, like that type of stuff, like no, like those are like huge homes, you know, like those are clearly like super expensive, like Dana Point, whatever.
Yeah, I've been on dating websites, and the women who come from those, we'll call them beach towns, they won't even respond they look at me and they say, no, he's not a millionaire. I don't want to deal with him.
That's how I grew up, sort of in that fantasy of thinking about like South County girls. That was always the like I always seemed like a crown jewel to like be able to like, oh dude, she's from Newport Beach, like whoa, like that was the feeling for sure.
Yeah,
like even
I've no doubt. So anyway, so let me get back. So I'm in my first house, no kids. Well, Sydney was close. So this would be 28 years ago. And I buy my first computer, and I buy an Apple Macintosh.
Why? Why did you need it?
Why did I buy a computer?
Yeah.
Because everyone else was.
Oh, so everyone else was having a computer, and like, what was like the like environment of that? Like what were people doing with computers at that time?
So we had these things called modems. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, and you had to buy the modem separately from the computer.
yeah,
You hook the modem up to the telephone, to the landline telephone, and you had to turn the modem on, and the modem would go out to a specific phone number. So you had an AOL account, right?
yes, yeah.
And
That was my era. That was starting to be my era of internet, where I had to deal with the whole like.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
That's it. That was a modem, but it would dial a local phone number. It would get in, and it would start making that noise, and then the computer would pick it up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this, I can't really do it here, but this Macintosh was maybe a foot high and foot and a half high, a foot wide.
Yeah, yeah.
And the screen on it was tiny.
Oh, I remember. Because my elementary school, we had a computer class, a computer room, and I remember for maybe like the first 2 years of like me having a computer class, they had those computers, and whatever, I didn't think anything of it. And then like really quickly, we got an upgrade to the colorful bulb, Apple
Yep.
computers,
Yep.
the new ones
Yep.
after that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But for like a short while, we had those really like, it was like a black screen with the green lettering.
But now you've made me remember. I'm going back to college now. I took a computer course in college, and you had to write program to make the computer do things. So you had to say, okay, line 10, and I can't even remember what the command was.
Yeah.
But you had to write all of this stuff, and there was no such thing as Google back then. There was something called LexisNexis.
LexisNexis.
If you wanted to do research on something, you went to LexisNexis, and you typed in and it would go away for 10 minutes and then bring back, maybe 10 or 12 results.
Yeah.
When you do a Google search now, it comes back with, 40,000 results.
I remember the first time I saw Google, because it was just such a weird name. I remember I was at the public library, and I saw what I'm assuming was a high schooler on the computer, and they were on this homepage, and I just saw Google, and I was like, that's such a weird name. Like, I don't even know what that means. Like, Google, what is that? And then I think later on I found out that Google was like a really high number. Like, that's what someone had told me. And I was like, oh, so it's a really large number. Like, so it's something about that or so. I don't know what it is. It's like, no, that's where you search for things. I was like, oh, okay.
Well, here's something for you to ponder. Okay? You know how the number line never ends, right?
Right.
Numbers go on into infinity.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the case, then every single sound that we make has to be a number.
Every single sound.
Yeah, because there are more numbers than there are sounds.
I can agree with that probably. That sounds fair.
So if that's the case, then at some point the word high has to represent the name of a number.
High has to represent a name of a number. I can understand that. I can try to wrap my head around that.
Well, just think about it. I mean, if it goes on forever, everything's got to have a name, right?
Yes.
And so, again, if you accept the theory that there are more numbers than there are sounds, then every word has to eventually be a name of a number.
Yeah, I get that. I can try to wrap my head around that, but that's tough because again, now we're playing with infinity. Now it's like once you start playing with infinity, then then you're like talking about God at that point.
Our minds can't handle it.
No,
Our
exactly.
minds cannot truly accept infinity.
So let's fast forward up to, let's leap ahead to like, for me, I got a smartphone. My first smartphone was the iPhone 5. I was for a short stint in middle school. I got a what they called a sidekick, which was
I remember that. Yep.
you know, like the one that you would, and it would flip up. You know, that I had for a little bit. I had that phone. I like begged my dad to get that for me. And it was, I didn't do shit with it. Like I couldn't text anybody. It's like there was nobody else to text message in 7th grade with that. So I didn't really, there was no reason for me to have that phone. So I had a flip phone for a long time. And actually one of my greatest like proud moments of myself is the fact that I held on to my flip phone up until the iPhone 5. Like I like held out. Like that was like a really good feeling for me.
So okay, so let me tell you my story about cell phone. So I told you my dad had one in his car, right?
Mm-hmm.
After college, my second job, I was working at an ad agency, and I was working on the Volkswagen of America advertising account. And I wanted a phone. My brother had a car phone. My dad had a car phone. I couldn't afford a car phone, and in the back of the Boston Herald was this tiny little classified ad, and they were selling bag phones. So it was a bag that was, I don't know, about the size of today's grocery bags, the plastic ones.
Yeah.
And it was about that size, and it had all of the works in it, and in the top it had a handset. And you carried the bag phone over your shoulder, and you had a cell phone with you.
Whoa, what a wild, what?
That was my first cell phone. Yep.
What an innovation. It's so wild to think that like, it's like, oh, this is gonna we're gonna do this. It's like, this is gonna take off. But it's like that fucking went nowhere.
Well, the first time somebody actually, you've heard the story about Alexander Graham Bell, right? How he spilled something. He was doing a test with the telephone, and his assistant was in the other room,
Mm-hmm.
and they were trying to make a phone call between the two of them, and it wasn't working, and he spilled some chemicals on himself, and he screamed, and he yelled for his assistant to come in, and the assistant heard it on the telephone. Heard him scream.
I don't know this story.
You know who Alexander Graham Bell is?
I do know that name, yes.
Okay. He invented the telephone, and before AT&T, it was called Bell.
That's
telephone.
right. That's right. Yeah.
And AT&T owned all of these different bells around the country, and then the government came in and said, "You can't do that. You have a monopoly. You have to sell off all the different bells." And so when they did that, they came up with Sprint, MCI. Did you ever hear of MCI?
I don't know if I did. No.
And so you had all of these companies that were now competing with AT&T for what's called long distance. The local phone calls were owned by the local Bell companies in each region.
Oh, interesting.
So AT&T became a long distance carrier, and it cost probably $1 a minute to make a long distance call from a landline.
I remember my mom was very adamant on controlling how we made phone calls. Yep. I remember that growing up. Yeah.
Because it was expensive.
Yeah. It's such a wild thing now to think that we're doing this. We're literally able to video chat. You could be anywhere in the world. We could be doing this right now.
Yep.
And it's like, I think that's more of what I'm sort of like looking forward to about like what the future is going to keep continuing to bring us is just like cutting out middlemen and just more and more where it's like, oh yeah, like this is like this should just be the standard. Like me being able to like just like pop in and out with this, like this should just be the standard versus, you know, walking around with a plastic bag over my shoulder.
Well, let me ask well, let me ask you this. How do you feel about this form of communication?
I think that this is I think it's a beautiful thing. To me, it's not a this or that. It's just complementary. You know, it's something that I really enjoy being able to do. That being said, a in-person, you know, meeting and like handshake, hug, all that stuff, that's all in my mind. It's not like that's going away because I know of a lot of, I know I've heard other people start to complain. Like I have friends who are like, man, like people just don't want to like be in person that much anymore. They want to stay at home. And I'm like, yeah, like there are always going to be those type of people. Like those type of people existed even when there wasn't phones, you know, they just were always in the place, whatever, like that's just a mindset. That's the type of person. This is always going to exist with, you know, seeing people in person. I don't fear the like advancement of technology, the idea of like, oh, eventually we're gonna have goggles on and whatever. Like I'm like, no, like bring it on. I love it.
You in my lifetime, certainly in your lifetime, we're going to be able to do things like this, and if we want, we'll be able to shake hands and actually feel each other's hands, even though it won't really be happening. And I can't even contemplate how that's going, but I know it's going to happen.
Exactly. That to me that's it. Like I'm like, I don't know, but I feel like I'm experiencing like what seems, you know, what's interesting. I haven't felt like there's a lot of advancement in this sort of technology. Like this, it's like, yeah, like, because like, you know, like webcams have been around for a long time. Like this technology, what we're doing right now, isn't something that's seemingly advanced. Like the advanced stuff that's happening, you know, it's funny, I was just watching, there's this YouTuber, this black dude named Marquise Brownlee. Have you seen him? He does like tech reviews of stuff on YouTube. Like he's like the biggest, he's like the fucking best. And he just did a review sort of like of this open AI called DALL-E 2. Like DALL, like Wall-E, but DALL-E 2. And the AI, you type in, you know, a drawing of a cat and a UFO, and the AI creates an image of your description. And it's like wild. It's like it's not funny. Like this isn't like, oh, this is really simple. It's like, no. This is like wild. They gotta be like, you can pull up what seems like real photographs of just like little descriptions. He asked the AI to come up with an image of a blue apple in a bowl of oranges. And it comes up with like realistic looking photographs of these things. It doesn't look like it's like, oh, like this is just a stock photo that's drawn up or whatever. It looks CGI. Like, no, this looks real. And it's able to do this in like incredible ways. Like that to me is the technology I'm looking forward to.
And does it represent exactly how you envisioned it in your head, or?
No, not exactly. It's really more of it's sort of just coming up with it's like Google, or it's like coming up with all of these source reference images, and then obviously with the words that you're typing in, it's connecting all of those dots. It's a really interesting video. I'll send it over to you so you can. Yeah, it's wild though. But like that to me, and I just was listening to Elon Musk like doing like a talk recently, like that just came out yesterday, and and like hearing all the advancements of the AI that goes into Teslas, and I'm like, dude, that is crazy.
Well, you know what's crazy to me? The self-driving car, I keep on thinking they're tinkering with it, and it's there. There are people who are on the roads with self-driving Teslas.
Yes.
That just blows my mind.
I mean, it's funny because it's not like my friends are like have the vehicles and they're like doing it. So to me, like if I see a Tesla, that's a driver. Somebody's driving that car and it's happening. It's like I don't know when it's going to be normal for me to be in a vehicle that's self-driving. I don't know when that's going to realistically happen. Maybe it's in the next 5 years. I don't know, but yeah.
It'll never happen for me because I love driving. There's just no way in the world I'm going to put my faith into a machine.
You know what? Don't eat your words, Steven. Like, don't put yourself out there to have to backpedal. It's okay to be like, at the moment, I don't want to let the car drive me. But at some point, you know what it is too? We also think that the infrastructure that our cars are like driving in is permanent. Like, oh, streets and highways, like the way they look and operate right now, like that'll never change. And it's like, no, like, all of a sudden in 20 years from now or 30 years from now, it's like, oh yeah, like we are driving, we do the underground, boring, like company sort of tunnel. And next thing you know, it's like, yeah, like I don't touch my car. Obviously it's like almost operates like a subway car, like a subway train. It's like, you just let it go. So it's like, I think that's I don't know if it's inevitable, but I think it's very possible. So.
Well, wasn't Elon Musk doing that in LA? Wasn't he tunneling under LA?
I believe he was. I don't know if it was like it was at least just a test. I don't know if he was doing it like, oh, this is going to happen in LA, like for sure. But I think with the whole like California politics, I think he was just ready to get out. So I don't know if that's continuing anymore.
Yeah, he's long gone. He doesn't own a house.
No, I know. I love that.
Well, again, your generation is going to. I mean, again, I was 25 years old when I bought my first place.
I'm like, that's fucking crazy for me.
But your generation, I keep on reading things that your generation and behind you, you're not going to want your own home.
And you know what's interesting? I was thinking about it right now about, two things. Yeah, do I want my own home? I would like my own home. More specifically, I would like to design my own home, my own space. Yeah. I think I'm different in that regard, though, because of who I am, the sort of requirements of that. Like, I mean, ideally, the reason why I'm designing a home so I could have, like, studio space, all these things that, like, for my art practice, all that. So for me, I know that I'm a little different in that regard. Not everybody wants that. They're fine with the cookie cutter, what do they call them? The like track homes or whatever? Yeah, like that type of thing. Like I know people are fine with that. I'm not okay with that.
But you have that creative gene, which while you want to have a studio, you want to design, there aren't many people who could even contemplate what goes behind designing a floor plan.
Yeah, which again, I'm like, I get that. The other thing that I was thinking about was how not valuable gold is going to be compared to Bitcoin.
Have you seen what's happened to Bitcoin in the last week?
I'm like, that's fine. What I'm saying is, if you talk to a 15-year-old and you're like, here is one Bitcoin and here's one bar of gold, which one do you want? They're going to want to take the Bitcoin 1,000% of the time. And I know that you know that too. And in your mind, you're like, every economics class is fucked because that's realistically where we're headed, where it's like that 15-year-old is going to end up eventually working at Goldman Sachs, eventually working for BlackRock, whatever it is. And not even that. That's also even a minority. But the fact of like somebody who's like, hey, I'm just a normal person, but I do know and I have it available at my fingertips to just buy some Bitcoin. Where it's like, do you even know how to buy gold? It's like, it's fucking challenging for me, and I'm internet savvy, but I know how to buy Bitcoin in 5 minutes.
Okay, so I'm going to get really not specific. Anyway, gold is a commodity, and there is a limit to how much gold there is on this earth.
Yes.
You can't make gold. However, you can make Bitcoin. It's like what our government has done for the last 10 years. They've just been printing money over and over and over.
Okay.
And what has happened? Our lives right now has happened. You know, we're paying $6 for gas, and it's because our government put so much money into the system that it became devalued. You can't get that with gold. Okay,
first of all, nobody knows the finite amount of gold that exists on Earth. Nobody knows that. There's a guesstimation, but nobody knows a finite amount. There is an actual finite amount of Bitcoin. You can't actually make any more Bitcoin. It's already done.
One person can change their mind and say, okay, we're going to have more.
It's not going to happen. How about that?
You don't know that.
You know that.
No,
it's a network of fucking computers that people are just like, it's done. It's such a basic level of it's like you can't, just like gold, it's like you can't I don't know what the word is, but like you can't like taint it in some manner. Like I don't know how to explain that, but like you can't infringe upon it. It's what it is. It's like it's literally just like an element in that same basic fashion. So is Bitcoin as far as the coding of it and the way that it works. And so with that being said, again, there's no finite amount. We know that for a fact. And it's getting much harder to mine because of the coding and the process that it takes for doing that. We don't know of the actual amount of gold. We have, again, a guesstimation of that. And there's so much weird deceit and lying around gold. Like there's so much weird cover-upness with it. It's like, I'm not saying that doesn't exist with Bitcoin. People obviously hack accounts, and like there's huge like findings about that people are like doing where it's like, oh, this person hacked like $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, you know, it's like that exists. That also majorly exists with the dollar, especially like literally money laundering happening with the dollar is like crazy high, and gold especially is just like, it's just all those things. And listen, I'll be honest with you, this is the extent of what I know. Anything else I'd be talking out of my ass. So I'm not gonna go and like try to create some other, you know, basis of knowledge that I don't really have. There are much smarter people about this that will argue for me that I'll throw in the ring. And listen, and that's not a very smart move because obviously, you know, I should definitely have a better understanding of it. That being said.
Well, no, you know a lot more about it than I do. And as you're talking, I'm sitting here thinking, I got to do some research on Bitcoin.
And honestly, it's worth doing that. It's worth doing a YouTube video, just like I'll send you a thing. I'll send you a thing. You can watch it. Like you know, whatever I find, it'll be very informative. You'll enjoy it. But that is, you know, that's sort of the future I'm interested in. And it's not even really a future. It's like this is the present moment that's happening. You know, I think a lot of people think this way already. Younger people think this way.
Yeah, no, 100% sure you're right, and that's that's the whole premise of why I wanted us to get together. Because there's a totally different thought process.
Yeah. No, you know what? To your point about homeownership too, it's been a big thing among. It's kind of like a catch-22 of this idea where it's like homeownership is really hard. So a lot of people my age and younger have not been thinking about homeownership because they're like, well, if I can't obtain it, then what's the alternative? And then because they go seek alternatives, then the economics of that market that they live within, where it's like, oh, you want to do like tiny homes, you want to do you want to go travel in like a really souped up van that like has like electronics in it and stuff like that, like, oh, we'll like provide that for you, which entails like obviously there's another thought. I don't know if it's a hot take, but I'll say this. I think that real estate as an asset is overrated. I think that real estate will eventually, I think it'll come tumbling down because I think that real estate isn't a thing that we need to think about as an asset. I think it's really almost like it's important in shelter. I understand that, but the value of it and the pricing monetarily, like I think it's overvalued, and I think it's overrated, and I think it's going to come crashing down because I honestly realistically think that more and more younger people, they want something else out of their lives. And I don't know what that looks like, but there's something to that. And I think that's going to start to happen more and more.
So what do you want to call that? They want something more out of their lives. Give me an example. Okay, so they're going to make a choice. I'm not going to get a house, which then means I can do X. What is X?
I think there's the work from home nomad. I think something there is existing. I love Airbnb. I think it's a really important innovation. Like I think it's like a really innovative concept, and I think more people are going to like that. Things in that direction are going to start to work out on its own, where people are going to want to, travel more. But it's like I don't know what exactly it looks like. I think there's just something there, and also this concept of micro ownership is also really interesting to me, where you're not going to own full homes. Like you may like micro ownership of, I don't even know, like something with like a timeshare maybe kind of concept. Yep. Like right now a big thing within, so crypto is a part of what they call the Web3 like wave. So like Web 2 is like Uber, Instagram, all that type of stuff, just like data collecting. But Web 3 is like crypto, NFTs, and this part called DAOs, DAO, DAOs. And DAOs are like pools. They have there's like a number of things that come with it, like community ownership. And a lot of that is going to start to come into, it's just going to come into play when we're talking about, again, like ownership of things. I don't know what that's going to look like with real estate and with just that. I think I'm going to leave it at that because that's as much as I kind of know, but I have a lot of intuition around that.
No, I think what you're talking about in terms of community, I do think that is a thing. I would say it's more Gen Z than it is millennial, but I do think there's something there. I don't get it, man. I don't want to live with anyone else.
No, but I think it's like don't live with anybody else. Like you're going to be doing you're going to be living your life, and I'm not saying like everything. It's not like, oh, all of a sudden we're going back to like living in villages, in like Portland or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, it's very like hippie. Like I don't even think that. I just think Uh, I just think there is something there in the sense of people going and moving and around a lot. But also, I do believe in the like setting up roots somewhere. Like there is that part of me, and I know that is a huge part in a lot of people. Like logical people are very much like, yeah, like, like here's me and my partner, and now we have a place, and we started off by having a dog, and now we're all of a sudden having kids, and it's like, yeah, like that is obviously a part of a foundation, and I wouldn't say home ownership is a part of that vertical, but roots somewhere, not moving around is important. So again, I don't even know if it'll be it's this or that. It'll be it'll be a coupling. It'll just, both will exist.
So when I fantasize about winning the lottery and getting $100 million,
Mm-hmm.
what I say to myself is, I'm going to go buy a house on the ocean.
Okay.
That's one of my fantasies. I don't care. I could buy any car I wanted at that point. I don't think I'd do much more than getting an Audi SUV. But when having a place to live on the ocean, oh my God, I would just love that.
You feel like that's the dream.
That's mine, yeah.
I mean, listen, that sounds fantastic. But I mean, like, but you have to own it. Like, you feel like it's like, oh, I need to own it. Like, what if you had access to it? Because do you want to live on the sand, or is that just some place you want to spend a lot of time at? These are good questions. I'm just like, because I'm like very interested.
I know. You know what it is? And this is going to sound awful, but I'm not a good sharer. I don't share well.
I know that feeling. I know that for sure. Yeah.
I don't care if it's a woman in my life or my car or my house. I want it to be mine. I don't want to share it.
Yeah, exactly.
But there are a lot of people in this world who, they totally believe in sharing. They think that's the way it should be.
Uh-huh.
And when I'm dead and gone, that might be the way the world is. I don't know.
No, I don't. That whatever personality, mindset, whatever that is not it's not like a generational thing. It's like I have things like that in my life. You know what I mean? Like, oh, this is mine. Don't touch it. Get away. There are other things in my life that I'm like, yeah, that's fine. I don't mind sharing that. But you know what's funny? There aren't a lot of things I'm willing to share, but I don't have a lot of things. That's the thing. I don't have a lot of things I'm able to share. And I think you would think differently if you had $100 million, right? Where you all of a sudden are in an abundant mindset. You're not like all of a sudden this like very like, no, I can't get another one of those. It's like, no, like I have enough to go around. Like there is an abundance. So I think that also comes with that.
So I would be selfish and I would get my house and that would be the first thing. But I'd have so much money that I would find a cause that was near and dear to me,
mm-hmm.
and I would absolutely contribute to it and try to be a part of it.
What would your life look like? Like, would you be working still? Like, would you what would sort of be the daily activity that you would want to do?
Yeah, I don't know. I have thought about that. I've wondered that if that were to come to fruition, would I just become a lazy SOB and sit on the couch all day? I hope not. I'd like to think I'd do a fair amount of traveling.
Okay.
I've never been to Europe. I'd love to go to Europe. I've never been to Central or South America. I'd love to go down there. Um, you know, and in all honesty, a lot of it I'd probably do by myself because, you know, if I'm with somebody else, they're either going to walk too fast or walk too slow. You know?
Oh, that is so good. That right there is like 100% 101. You have an issue that you need to figure out. That's 100%. You literally vocalize that you're like, there's obviously something here with me. But you know what? There's obviously, you know what? Or there's somebody who's like, I like that. That's exactly what I want because I am exactly in the same way. Maybe that exists too.
It's selfishness on my part. I care about me more than anyone else. Well, I care about my daughters more than anything else. But right after that, it's me.
Mm.
And, you know, I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it at the pace I want to do it.
Yes.
I wouldn't work for someone else. I've done enough of that in my life. So, but there would have to be something business or work related. Maybe I'll give you a run for your money with painting.
Yeah, but that's, you know, it's something I've thought about for myself. I was like, oh, if I won the lotto, like, what would I do? I mean, I would definitely be. I'd still be making art. Like, I feel very.
Yep,
that's
I'm sure you would.
me, you know. I feel that. I think there would be. I've said this before, and I don't know how true it is now, but there is a strong part of me that feels like this, where I would go learn. I would go mentor. I would, like, you know, and like to the point where it'd be like, obviously, I don't need like, oh, you need to pay me for an internship. It's like, no, I can literally go work for you for free at a baker, you know, and just be like, yeah, I want to learn how to bake, you know, or like, oh, I'll learn how to sculpt. Like, I'll work for a sculptor and be a mentor there, you know, or be a mentee. It's like, I'm like, okay, I just want to like learn how to do these things. Like, that'd be cool.
I figured out my answer, what I would do. I would flip houses because I want to be a carpenter, I want to be a plumber, I want to be an electrician, okay? And my first house that I flipped would probably take 3 or 4 years.
Oh, wow. So you like go in.
Well, no, I don't know how to do any of those things. I would have to learn.
Oh, you're like, oh, I want to learn how to be a carpenter, do all these things, yeah. And then once I can get that, do the, like, you know, basically completely renovate a home and then flip it.
I would learn it as I'm renovating.
Yes, okay.
And I would not be afraid of making mistakes. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And, you know, I see videos of people who are, you know, your mind might, I'm sure your mind works differently than mine. I have a pretty mathematical head, but I can't get angles, you know. And when I think of putting up, like molding, crown molding, a 90-degree angle, I can handle that, okay? But like a 35-degree, and I know conceptually it's just setting up the saw so that it does a 30, but how does it, and until I actually do it, I won't get it. I have to do something.
Okay, this is a really good practice that I've used on my own mindset or whatever. So you have a pretty good idea then of like what you would do with that if you had $100 million to do all that. Do you think you can do a version of that with like right now without that $100 million? Like, are there steps in that direction that you could do where you're at, like, oh, I watch YouTube videos of carpentry or of like molding or whatever. Like, is there a direction of that? You know, like, could you for once a week go be at a carpenter like workshop or something like that?
The answer is obviously yes. There must be something. But I have this tendency, and I think it's in a lot of ACAs, I put up roadblocks before I can ever get there. Okay? So you were asking me the question, And in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, so I go get a saw. I get a used saw, right, table saw. Where the hell am I going to put it? I got this crappy little apartment, you know? And so I put up all these roadblocks, and then you said, could I go somewhere and do, and I hadn't even thought of that. But yeah, probably.
Yeah, yeah. And the reason why I say that is because I was like, oh, I want to learn pottery. And, I'm like, I'm not going to get a wheel here, that seems like a big investment to buy that. So I was like, oh, I'll go, to a studio where they I did a class. It literally did for like a full semester, of just like, all right, for a couple months I was just at it, once or twice a week. And it was a great experience. I learned it. I don't know if I'll do it again, but that was cool.
Did you make anything good?
No, it was really, I think I was two things. I know I wasn't great at it. Like I didn't pick it up naturally like some other people probably have. And my teacher sucked. So there was that feeling too. I felt like my teacher was basically using the place as his own personal studio, and then anytime someone had a question, then he would kind of help them out. Right. But it was just kind of
No, you've actually sparked something in me. Because I'd like to learn how to cook, too. I mean, I know how to cook, but I might like to take a cooking class.
Dude, I don't know if I want to learn how to cook. I've actually thought about that. I'm like, have we talked about this? I remember talking to somebody about this where I was just like, there are some people who see, they taste a delicious dish or something like that, and they go, oh, I want to figure out how to make that. And I'm not that person. I don't want to figure out how to make that. In my mind, I'm like, I want to continue to come back here so that you can make this for me. Okay, this is the restaurant that they make this delicious thing at. Great. I'm just going to keep coming back here because this is exactly what this is. I don't want to learn how to do this at home.
Yeah, I don't know. You bring up a good point. I mean, I'm not dying to make meals. There's something about creating something and having a finished product. It's why, I say carpentry. You can build something from nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You can make a meal from just raw materials, right?
Yeah, I'm very into the woodwork, the idea of oh, I want to make a chair, I want to make a table. I'll just do that. I'm like, oh, that's amazing.
And what I do for work is a lot of data digging, but I know how to cut data better than 90% of the people in the world. There are people who know SQL Server, and I don't know that. But I know Excel like the back of my hand. And if whatever I'm looking at is limited to 1.4 million rows, I can do it. Okay? And if I needed to, I could learn Access and go past 1.4 million. But the nice thing is I can get into the data and I find things that other people don't. And while it may not be creating something that I can, sit in, it is creating something that nobody else has figured out or thought about. And I'm a why person, and I get the answer to my question, but I then say, but why? Why is it this? Why is this the answer? And I keep going down and down, down, down.
Yeah.
And then I find that nugget of gold. And then the hard part is figuring out how I get myself back out.
Okay, yeah.
Because I go down in mazes. I don't know if you've ever dealt with data, but you can truly get lost in trying to find something because you start slicing and getting smaller and smaller pieces, and segmenting, I guess is what you would call it.
Right.
And
no, my friend is he works in data. I have a couple friends who work in data actually. One of them went to learned code so that he can create algorithms to handle data. And I mean, if you guys, maybe one day we could all meet or whatever. But it's really fascinating stuff because it is that. It's like a gigantic pool of just stuff, of just data. And the idea is just like, all right, like, what can we do with this? Like, let's go swimming. Let's dive into it.
The thing that amazes me is what companies like Facebook and Google, I've worked at Fortune 500 companies, and they have data, and it's a mess. Everywhere I've ever gone, their data is a mess, and they're always trying to fix it and clean it up and whatnot. And I live in that world. I accept that there are limitations. But then when I think about the things that Google does with, Alexa hearing me say something, Google can take that data and totally turn it into something else, and 3 days later show me an ad for something,
Mm-hmm.
in a totally different world.
I love it. That's like my favorite stuff.
Oh, God, I hate it. I hate that they listen to me and they know me. I hate that.
What do you hate? I'm like, this is, now I don't get shitty commercials. How about that? Now I don't get shitty commercials.
It's none of their fucking business. And you know what? Every once in a while, those shitty commercials make me laugh.
I'm like, sure, yeah, but what, you know what I mean. It's like now I'm getting tailored things. It's like, hey, I've been very into outdoor stuff, so lately I've been getting a lot of outdoor things. By the way, Mark Zuckerberg, I've been really into, hiking. I would like more hiking things, It's like, I want more, like, just, I'm not saying I want more advertisement, but the idea of like, yeah, like, of course I want to get more relevant, advertisement, in my face versus just like.
Intimately. Don't you think intimacy should be limited to very few people?
Maybe. I'm like, maybe. I'm like, yeah, maybe. But it's not I don't know. And it's like, do they know me intimately? Maybe they do. I think they probably do. I just don't.
It's getting to the point where they're going to predict what you're going to do next. And I fear it's going to get to the point where they're not only going to know what you're going to do next, they're going to convince you what you're going to do next.
There you go. That's what I'm looking for. Listen, there is a human element that I am very optimistic about that I hold on to, which is the element of surprise. The element that I can still surprise myself is what I hold on to the most. And so that to me is the reason why I'm not afraid of the internet. Like that's what I'm like, I guess you can maybe sort of say that. Like I'm not afraid of that because at the end of the day, I can close my laptop, I can throw away my phone. I know I'm not going to do that. And let's be honest, we're not going to do that as a society. That being said, it's like I could take a fresh breath, in and out, and just I could surprise myself. There's a human element to this whole thing that I'm really, again, I'm going to continue to say it. I'm just very optimistic about, and that to me is why I'm not afraid of this.
You can't lose that though. That is what I'm afraid of, is that we're going to lose that human element, and that we're. Have you read 1984?
No, I haven't.
I don't know if you read. I don't read that much, but I had to read it in high
school. No. But it's like I know 1984. I know Animal Farm. I get it. Brave New World. It's there.
You know why he entitled it 1984? You're never gonna guess.
I don't know.
He wrote it in 1948, and he just flipped the numbers.
Oh, wow.
That's the only reason.
That was it.
Yeah, he knew it was in the future, but he didn't, and he just said, okay, I'm just going to flip the 8 and the 4.
arbitrarily, just
Yep.
sort of.
Yep. That's
I
how
mean,
we
to be
came up
honest,
with
it's
that
like
name.
to me, like that says a lot more than just, you know, because it's like, oh, like, yeah, I'll just switch the numbers, but and like I said, like, oh, that's just in the future, and it's like, and it came so fast, honestly.
Yeah. You know, I don't know if I told you this, and we're running out of time. I got to go to the gym, but and at some point I need to finish my trek into the internet because we got off track there. So, but I do want to come back to that next week. We'll pick it up at the Mac. But oh God, now I lost my train of thought. What did I want to say?
1984.
Yeah. Oh, you know, I was born in 1964.
1964. Okay.
Yeah. And I was born when my dad was 30, which meant he was born in 1934.
Mm-hmm.
My dad lived through World War II. It blew me away when I thought about that. I mean, he was really young, but he lived through World War II.
No, I mean, you're 10 years old, like, you know what's going on.
Yeah. You know, and his father, my grandfather, owned 3 different hardware stores in Iowa. And the way he got through the Great Depression, he bartered.
That's wild. He got through the Great Depression. Like, to think that, like, somebody lives, like,
But,
you know,
I mean,
somebody that lived in the Great
thrived
Depression.
because he was able to trade the seed, the feed for the cows. He traded it for a cow, you know, and he had a freezer full of, you know, sirloin and ground beef and you know, pretty much anything you wanted. And you know, you got fresh broccoli and you know, and the Great Depression, I think it was like 8 years long.
It's a long-ass time.
Yeah, but I mean, it was really bad in the middle, right? So it was really only 4 years because then they started coming out of it.
That's the, like, the Google search of, like, was the Great Depression that bad? Like, it's like...
Well, yeah, there's a percent. You know, you live in it. It's like what we're going through right now. We're all making adjustments.
Yeah.
Because we have to. There's nothing we can do about it. We can yell and scream and say, "Oh my God, it's the president's fault. He isn't doing what he should," or it's the previous president's fault who, you know, left this mess for him. Whatever the case may be, they're idiots running our lives. And
again, that to me, you're literally hitting the nail on the head about the human element, which is that it's like we have the capability of reasoning and to understand that we are in charge of our own lives and
right.
to take responsibility of that, and that is exactly, it's like, oh, I'm in charge here. Like, I need to, like, make something happen. Like, the president does not dictate how I'm going to live my life. Like, I live my life.
Yep. That's it.
All right. That was fantastic.
So what? Okay, I'm going to stop the recording. Bye, everyone.